Family reunions are supposed to be warm, nostalgic events, a time to reconnect, share laughter, and remember why you still tolerate each other. At least, that's what I told myself as I pulled up to the old country house my grandparents had built decades ago. The air smelled faintly of barbecue, mixed with the sweet scent of blooming lilacs. Laughter drifted from the backyard, punctuated by the sound of children running across the grass. From the outside, it looked perfect, a picture of family harmony. Inside, it was different. My aunt clutched her wineglass a little too tightly. My cousin avoided eye contact with my mother. Conversations seemed forced, polite, almost rehearsed. I could feel the tension humming beneath the surface, like a low electrical buzz. I made small talk with relatives I hadn't seen in years. "So, how's work? Are you still living in the city?" The usual surface-level chatter. But then, I caught sight of my Uncle David, standing near the porch. His eyes weren't on the group. They were on me. When I finally walked over, he didn't smile. He didn't even say hello. Instead, he glanced around, checking who might be watching. Then, in a low, steady voice, he said, "You need to see this." Something in his tone froze me. It wasn't a casual suggestion. It was urgent, almost fearful. Before I could ask anything, he gently took my arm and steered me toward the side of the house, away from the noise, the laughter, the smiling faces. That's when I realized my heart was beating faster. I had no idea what he was about to show me. But deep down, I already knew it wasn't going to be good. Uncle David's grip was firm, but not rough, as he guided me through the side entrance of the house. The hallway was dim, the curtains drawn to keep the afternoon sun from heating up the old place. The laughter from outside became muffled, replaced by the faint creak of the wooden floor beneath our feet. He didn't say a word, and that silence was worse than anything he could have told me. Every few steps, he glanced over his shoulder, as if expecting someone to follow us. My stomach tightened. We passed the kitchen where my mother was arranging plates of food. She didn't see us slip by. The smell of roast beef and fresh bread hung in the air, but it did nothing to ease my growing unease. At the far end of the hall, he stopped in front of a narrow door I barely remembered. It led to one of the storage rooms, a place that had always been locked when I was a kid. Without a word, he reached into his pocket and produced an old brass key. The lock clicked, and the hinges groaned as the door swung open. Inside, the air was cooler, tinged with the scent of dust and something faintly metallic. A single bare light bulb dangled from the ceiling, casting long shadows over stacks of cardboard boxes. He walked straight to one in the far corner, a worn, battered thing with frayed edges and a strip of duct tape holding it shut. Dropping to one knee, he peeled the tape away and slowly opened the flaps. I expected old family photos, maybe a few keepsakes. Instead, I saw manila envelopes, thick and overstuffed, each one marked with dates in black ink. Beneath them, there were small stacks of photographs, some color, some black and white, all neatly bundled with twine. He looked up at me, his expression grave. "I've been keeping this for years," he said quietly, "and you're the only one I can trust with it now." I knelt beside Uncle David, the wooden floor cool beneath my knees. He pulled out the first manila envelope and handed it to me. The paper felt old, slightly rough at the edges, like it had been handled many times over the years. I slid the documents out, yellowed letters, a few postcards, some official-looking papers. At first, nothing seemed unusual. The letters were written in neat cursive, the kind you don't see much anymore. They spoke of everyday things, gardening, recipes, birthday wishes. But then I noticed the names. They weren't family members I knew. "Who's Margaret?" I asked. David's eyes narrowed, but he didn't answer right away. "Keep reading." The next letter wasn't about recipes. It was dated almost 30 years ago, and the tone was urgent, almost frantic. Words like payment, agreement, and keep quiet were underlined. There was no signature, just an initial, R. I looked up at David, but he was already pulling out another bundle from the box, this time photographs. The first few were harmless: family gatherings, holiday dinners, summer picnics. But about halfway through the stack, the mood shifted. One picture showed two men I didn't recognize, standing in what looked like our grandparents' basement. In the background, I could just make out a familiar piece of furniture, my grandfather's old desk. On top of it was a small metal box, half open, with thick envelopes inside. Another photo made my skin prickle. My father, much younger, shaking hands with one of those men. "Why do you have these?" I whispered. David met my eyes, his voice low and steady. "Because if anyone else in this family saw them, I'm not sure you'd still be safe here." David slid another manila envelope toward me. It was heavier than the first, the flap sealed with brittle yellow tape that crumbled under my fingers. Inside was a single thick stack of papers, folded neatly but worn along the creases. I unfolded the top sheet. The handwriting was shaky, uneven, almost as if written in a rush, or by someone whose hands wouldn't stop trembling. "If you're reading this, it means I couldn't stop them." My eyes darted to David, but he just gave a short nod, urging me to keep going. "They think no one will ever find out, but money leaves a trail. The deal was never supposed to involve family. Now, if anyone asks, you never saw me." The letter didn't have a name, only a date in the top corner, April 14th, 1995. I quickly scanned the next few lines. The words blurred together: cash deliveries, threats, basement, something about the desk. And then one last haunting phrase: "If they knew I was writing this, I wouldn't be alive." I felt the hair on the back of my neck stand up. "David, what is this about?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached into the envelope again and pulled out a single Polaroid. It was slightly faded, but I recognized the setting instantly: the old shed behind our grandparents' property. The door was open, and inside, on the floor, was a large, dark stain. Before I could ask, the faint sound of footsteps echoed down the hallway. Heavy, deliberate. David froze. He glanced toward the door, his hand automatically sliding the Polaroid back into the envelope. His voice was low but urgent now. "We can't be seen with this. Not here. Not today." The steps were getting closer, slow, like whoever it was wanted to listen before they arrived. I quickly folded the letter and shoved it back into the envelope. David closed the box, pressing the flaps together just as the doorknob rattled. A voice, calm but with an undercurrent I didn't like, floated through the door. "Hey, you two, what are you doing in there?" It was my father. David stood up first, blocking the doorway slightly. "Just catching up," he said casually, though I could hear the strain in his tone. The silence that followed was thick. Then the knob turned again, more forcefully this time, but David stepped forward, forcing the door mostly shut. "We'll be right out," he said firmly. My heart was pounding so loudly I was sure it could be heard. My mind was racing, about the letter, the photograph, the stain in the shed, but most of all about the way my father's shadow lingered under the doorframe before finally moving away. When the sound of his footsteps faded, David turned back to me. His face was pale. "You need to leave tonight," he whispered. "And take this with you." I should have listened to David. Every instinct screamed at me to take the envelope, leave quietly, and not look back. But walking out of a family reunion without raising suspicion wasn't easy. Not when everyone would notice my absence. So I stayed. We returned to the yard, where kids were running around with balloons, and my mother was laughing with my aunts near the buffet table. On the surface, it looked like any normal afternoon, but I couldn't shake the image of that letter. Every face I saw, uncles, cousins, even my father, I found myself wondering, do they know? Were they part of it? David stuck close to me at first, but after about 20 minutes, he was pulled away into a conversation with two of my uncles. I stood alone near the drinks table, my mind replaying the voice at the door, the sharp tone when my father asked what we were doing. As the sun dipped lower, some of the older relatives began heading inside. I took the opportunity to slip toward the side of the house, away from the main crowd. I just needed a few minutes to breathe, to think about my next move. That's when I heard it. Two voices, low, deliberate, drifting from the open kitchen window. I froze in place. One of them was unmistakably my father's, the other. It took me a moment, but then I recognized it as my Uncle Ray, the man I'd seen in the old photograph, shaking hands with my father. "Can't let her start asking questions," Ray's voice said. "You know what happened last time." "She won't," my father replied, his tone clipped. "David's got a big mouth, but he knows better than to cross me." "Still," Ray said, "if she saw those photos—" "Then it's already too late," my father interrupted. My stomach dropped. I pressed myself against the wall, barely breathing. There was a pause, then the sound of ice clinking in glasses. My father's voice came again, lower now. "Just make sure the shed stays locked, and if anyone goes near it, I'll handle it." Ray gave a short laugh, but it wasn't the kind that reached the eyes. "Like you handled it in '95? I couldn't see them, but the silence that followed was heavy, like a challenge had been thrown. Then my father spoke, his words slow and cold. "You think I wouldn't do it again?" I didn't hear the rest. My pulse was hammering too loudly. I stepped back from the wall, making sure my shoes didn't scrape against the gravel. In that moment, I knew two things for certain. David had been right, and I might not be safe here even for the rest of the night. I was already halfway to my car. The envelope was hidden under my sweater, pressed against my ribs so tightly I could feel my own heartbeat in it. If I could just get to the driver's seat, I could be gone before anyone noticed. But as I reached the gravel path leading to the driveway, a burst of laughter erupted from the patio. Then my mother's voice cut through the noise. "Where's Emily? We're about to do the toast." Every muscle in my body stiffened. I turned slowly, forcing a smile, as if I'd simply been wandering. A dozen pairs of eyes were already on me, my father's among them. He stood near the center table, a glass of red wine in hand, his gaze locked on mine in a way that made my skin crawl. "Come on," he said. Not a request, an order. I walked back, each step feeling heavier. My fingers itched to grip my car keys, but I shoved them deeper into my pocket. David was leaning against the railing, arms crossed. The moment I got close enough, he whispered, "What are you doing?" "You need to leave now." I gave a tiny shake of my head. "I can't. Not without everyone noticing." "Noticed or not," he muttered, "it's going to get worse if you stay." Before I could respond, my father tapped his glass with a spoon, silencing the crowd. "Family," he began, his tone warm on the surface, but carrying an edge I couldn't ignore. "It's not often we're all together, and when we are, it's important to remember loyalty, trust." The words hit me like a veiled warning. I glanced at David. His jaw was set, his eyes never leaving my father. "Now," my father continued, raising his glass, "I want to acknowledge someone who's been away for a while, but is finally back with us." His eyes bored into mine. "Emily." A soft ripple of polite clapping spread through the group. I forced a small nod, my throat too dry to speak. "She's family," my father went on, "and in this family, we take care of each other. Right, Emily?" "So." The way he said my name made it sound like a challenge, like a test. I swallowed hard. "Right," I managed, my voice barely steady. Everyone drank. The moment the glasses lowered, my father's smile faded just slightly, almost imperceptibly. But I saw it, and I understood. He knew I had something. David stepped forward, clinking his glass a little too loudly. "Well," he said quickly, "speaking of family, I think Emily and I are going to head out." But before he could finish, my Uncle Ray interrupted. No, she hasn't even seen the shed yet." The shed. My blood ran cold. I wanted to refuse. Every instinct told me to turn around, grab my car keys, and run. But there were too many eyes on me, waiting, watching. My father's smirk was faint, but it was there. Uncle Ray clapped me on the shoulder, his hand a little too heavy, steering me toward the far end of the yard. David was at my side in an instant. "You don't have to do this," he murmured. "Yes, I do," I whispered back, though it wasn't bravery that made me say it. It was the cold realization that refusing might be more dangerous than going along. The path to the shed was narrow, lined with tall grass that brushed against my jeans. The chatter from the reunion faded behind us until the only sounds were the crunch of gravel under our shoes and the faint creak of the shed door swinging in the evening breeze. It was smaller than I remembered. Weathered wood, peeling paint, a rusted padlock hanging uselessly from the latch. Someone had already unlocked it. Ray stepped forward and pulled the door open. "After you," he said with a smile that didn't touch his eyes. The smell hit me first. Damp, old wood mixed with something metallic. The air inside was cooler, heavier. My eyes adjusted slowly to the dim light filtering through a single dusty window. At first, I saw nothing unusual. Shelves with jars of nails, an old lawnmower, stacks of paint cans. But then my gaze caught on something in the corner. A wooden trunk, its surface scarred with deep scratches. "That wasn't here before," I murmured. Ray's eyes flicked to my father, and for a split second, I saw it. The tension in his jaw, the flicker of unease. David moved past me, crouching in front of the trunk. "Don't!" I hissed, but he was already testing the latch. It popped open without resistance. Inside were stacks of photographs, dozens, maybe hundreds, tied in neat bundles with twine. I picked one up, my fingers trembling. The image was of my father, younger but unmistakable, standing in the same yard, in front of this same shed. Beside him was a man I didn't recognize, his arm slung casually over my father's shoulder. But what made my stomach twist was the third figure in the background. It was my mother, and she was crying. I flipped to the next photo, then the next. In every one, the expressions were wrong. People smiling stiffly, while someone else, always in the background, looked terrified. "What is this?" My voice was barely above a whisper. Ray didn't answer. My father stepped closer, his shadow falling over me. "Some things," he said slowly, "are better left where they belong." David's hand tightened on my arm. "Emily, we need to go, now." But as we turned, I saw something in the far corner. A second trunk, smaller, with my name carved into the lid. The smaller trunk, with my name carved roughly into the wood, seemed impossibly out of place in that dusty, forgotten shed. My fingers trembled as I reached out, brushing away a thin layer of cobwebs. David's eyes locked onto mine, silently begging me to think twice, but something inside me demanded I know. I pulled the lid open. The rusty hinges creaked loudly, breaking the heavy silence. Inside was a bundle of letters, yellowed with age, tied together with a faded ribbon. Beneath the letters lay a small, worn-out teddy bear, one I recognized instantly. It was the same bear I'd lost when I was 6 years old. My heart pounded. I pulled out the top letter and unfolded it carefully. "Emily, if you ever find this, know that everything you've been told about your childhood is a lie." The handwriting was shaky, but unmistakably my mother's. The letter went on, revealing a secret I never imagined. I was not my parents' biological child. I was adopted, taken in after a tragedy no one spoke about. The letter detailed how my real parents had been involved in something dangerous, how my mother had pleaded with family members to protect me by hiding the truth, burying the past deep where no one would find it. It mentioned names, some familiar, some not, and a warning. If anyone outside the family knew, it could destroy everything, and some would do anything to keep it that way. Tears blurred my vision as I clutched the letter. The teddy bear suddenly felt like a symbol of a stolen childhood, innocence lost beneath layers of lies and silence. David placed a steady hand on my shoulder. They kept this from you to protect you, but now you know, and it changes everything. The door slammed behind us, making me jump. My father's voice echoed from outside. Emily, it's time to come home. I folded the letter slowly, my mind racing with questions and a burning need for answers. This was no longer just a family reunion. It was the unraveling of a life I thought I knew. The weight of the letters and the truth inside that trunk pressed on me like a stone. I could no longer pretend ignorance. The time for silence was over. Back inside the house, the chatter from the reunion seemed distant, almost unreal. Every glance felt heavier, every smile forced. I took a deep breath and stood up, drawing everyone's attention. Wait, I said, voice trembling but firm. I have something to say. My father's eyes narrowed, but he said nothing. The room quieted as I held up the letter. For years, I believed I knew my family, my past. But now, I know there's been a secret kept from me. I glanced around the room. I'm not who you think I am. I was adopted, and someone here made sure the truth was buried. A shocked silence fell. Some faces blanched, others tightened with anger. My mother looked away, tears shining in her eyes. You lied to me, I said, feeling tears sting my own eyes. Why? Who else knows? David stepped beside me, his presence steady and protective. My sister warned me not to trust him, I whispered, looking directly at my father. But I trusted you all, and now I'm done pretending. My father's jaw clenched, but before he could speak, my Aunt Rose, usually quiet and reserved, stepped forward. Emily, she said softly, there's more you don't know. Things that were done to protect you, and us all. But the truth must come out. With trembling hands, she pulled out an old photo album. This family's history is darker than you think, but hiding it only made it worse. As I flipped through the pages, I saw faded pictures of people I didn't recognize, places I'd never been told about, and faces marked with pain and fear. The reunion that was meant to be a celebration had become a reckoning, and I was at the center of it all, no longer a silent witness, but a force demanding answers. The room remained still, the weight of Aunt Rose's words hanging in the air like a thick fog. For the first time, I saw cracks in the perfect facade my family had so carefully maintained for decades. The smiles were gone. Only raw, unspoken truths remained. My father finally spoke, his voice low and strained. Emily, we did what we thought was best. You have to understand. I understand enough, I cut in, my voice steadier now. You kept me in the dark to protect yourselves, not me. But I won't live by your rules anymore. David reached out, taking my hand. You're not alone. We'll face this together. Tears welled in my mother's eyes as she whispered, I'm sorry. I nodded, feeling a strange mix of sorrow and relief. The betrayal stung deeply, but so did the truth, because it was the only way forward. That night, I packed a bag. I wasn't just leaving a reunion. I was leaving a past full of secrets and lies. It was time to write my own story, one not bound by shadows or silence. As I walked out the door, I glanced back once. The house was dark, the family inside already retreating behind closed doors. But I wasn't looking back anymore. The future was uncertain, but it was mine to claim. The room remained still, the weight of Aunt Rose's words hanging in the air like a thick fog. For the first time, I saw cracks in the perfect facade my family had so carefully maintained for decades. The smiles were gone. Only raw, unspoken truths remained. My father finally spoke, his voice low and strained. Emily, we did what we thought was best. You have to understand. I understand enough, I cut in, my voice steadier now. You kept me in the dark to protect yourselves, not me. But I won't live by your rules anymore. David reached out, taking my hand. You're not alone. We'll face this together. Tears welled in my mother's eyes as she whispered, "I'm sorry." I nodded, feeling a strange mix of sorrow and relief. The betrayal stung deeply, but so did the truth, because it was the only way forward. That night, I packed a bag. I wasn't just leaving a reunion, I was leaving a past full of secrets and lies. It was time to write my own story, one not bound by shadows or silence. As I walked out the door, I glanced back once. The house was dark, the family inside already retreating behind closed doors. But I wasn't looking back anymore. The future was uncertain, but it was mine to claim.